You're listening to the Road to Wisdom podcast, weaving stories told by wonderful minds about all things motherhood, health, intimacy, politics, nature, and everything in between.
Join us on an adventure discovering unique experiences that we can learn from to enhance the ways in which we live.
We are your hosts, Chloe
and Keshia.
Welcome to our podcast, The Road to Wisdom. We're actually really happy to be having this conversation because I feel like it's a bit potent for us at the moment because we're obviously transforming our bodies.
Constantly morphing.
Yeah. So Marisa, you've been through this journey too, but in a different way. You went from bodybuilding, gym freak. I shouldn't say gym freak. I'm gonna gym obsessed, bodybuilding, really focused on, sculpting your body and looking a certain way, to self-loving, food enjoying, just a beautiful representation of loving our bodies as they are and accepting them and not trying to, I guess, fit into a box and, think that we have to look a certain way to deserve to be accepted or, loved. Yeah. Loved. Mostly loving ourselves.
Let's not say that word. I'll probably start crying.
So Marisa, welcome. And I'm so excited to talk about this.
Thank you. Me too. Yeah. The self-love piece is where it all stems from, which is, it's really like when you think about it, like it's so deep, but then you realize the work to healing that is also so liberating because you're like, oh, it's really just me needing to hold space for myself and love myself. And
well, we'd love to just get a little bit of a rundown on kind of what it looked like back then and what was kind of like the catalyst for your change.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, firstly, thank you for inviting me on and for being here. We're like 2 seconds in and I'm already enjoying myself. So you guys, your vibe is on point. I love it. Yeah. So my journey, if I really go back, it really just started with me loving the gym, loving moving my body. I was never really in sports, so I kind of got into weightlifting, and then somehow I've discovered the world of bodybuilding, and of course that led me down many different rabbit holes, but mainly the body dysmorphia, the restrictive eating, struggling with binge eating, all those things kind of just, when I think about it, they were always there in that part of my life because it is such an extreme way to live. And I also had no idea that I was struggling with those things. Like back then, this is now well over 5 years ago, probably like closer to 7 or 8 years now that I've stepped out of the bodybuilding world. I had no idea what binging even was. I didn't even know there was like a word for that behavior. And similarly with your body image and struggling with body dysmorphia, like I just was in that world and I had no idea how toxic it was, basically, because I was also just so surrounded by it. Every single woman that I knew in that industry was also going through that. And I was like, oh, it's totally just normal to, have these crazy consuming thoughts and be thinking about food 24/7 and be using exercise as punishment. Like the laundry list goes on, but I really just, that was so normalized for me.
Did you have any pre going into the bodybuilding industry, did you have any kind of like eating issues or issues around food or body image?
Yeah, it's funny that you asked me that because I just had someone today ask me that question. And when I really think back to it, I don't think I did. Like, I think maybe I remember, for example, with my grade 12 grad, I kind of like probably underate and, made my meals really small to fit into my prom dress or whatever, but it wasn't like all consuming, it was like maybe for that one event, which still is disordered, but I never struggled really on a level of like an eating disorder until my
That's super interesting because that's an industry that's building these, like, they're mental conditions.
But it's supposed to be healthy. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah.
Back to your story.
No, absolutely. It's so true, really. And again, it's just funny that these questions are coming up because I actually explained too to someone who asked me this today, like, it, when you really think about it, it is such a crazy sport where, you know, you starve yourself, you go crazy on exercise, you literally try and be your smallest self possible, and you pay all this money to like register, buy the bikini, you know, all to get judged and critiqued by someone you don't know, for them to tell you if your body
Crazy.
looks good enough.
Yeah.
Like, what? When I look back on that, I'm like, what? But anyways, I digress. But yes, that's a totally valid question. And so that totally birthed for me all those disordered patterns. And even now, when I think about it, like, I'm so thankfully far out of that part of my journey, but I still have those things come up, like those old thought patterns, those old narratives. And so I would say what really was the catalyst for me to heal those things and start that journey of like, okay, this isn't normal. This isn't how I want to live my life. It was actually a few different things, but in a nutshell, it was like I realized I no longer wanted to do bodybuilding because like I felt like crap. I was napping 4 times a day. I was like, there's no way I can possibly continue down this path. Like I just feel like garbage. And I was also struggling with low self-esteem. Like it didn't matter how small I got, it was never enough. It was never good enough. And I still remember too, I pretty much had zero body fat on me, and I still thought I had more to lose. Like I still thought, well, I still need to be smaller, right? And so I realized then, okay, I don't want to do this to my body anymore. I feel like trash. And then at that same kind of time, I was also going through like a shift with my then long-term boyfriend. It was getting a little bit toxic. You know, we were both in the bodybuilding world, and I was kind of like, I don't want my whole life to be about my body anymore. And he was still very much so like, my six packs are my identity. And I was like, I just don't, I don't resonate with that anymore. And so we were growing apart, and that felt really hard too, because I also identified not only with that body, but inside that relationship, because I was like 19 to 25 in that relationship. And then when that relationship ended, I also experienced shortly after, which I know now it was my body really just being like, we're shutting things down here. But I went through this period of chronic pain, this like mystery injury where I was in so much excruciating pain that I could barely get out of bed. And it just happened out of nowhere. And I really think for me, like now looking back, I'm like so thankful that happened. But it was really a way, I think, for the universe to be like, you need to take a look at the path you're going down. Because at that point, I still identified with my body. I was kind of discovering more food freedom, but I still very much so was like, my body image was just very severely like just all over the place. And so when I couldn't work out anymore, I was like bedridden basically. My mom literally had to come clean my apartment, I remember, because I just couldn't do anything. That was really when I had kind of like, I don't know if you've heard of the term like dark night of the soul, where I really had to like go deep of like, whoa, like my whole world is my body and it's changing now. So I need to like figure out what's going on here and how to kind of move forward and no longer be trapped in that. Because also back then too, I'm kind of all over the place here, but things are just popping in my mind. Also at that time too, like my whole Instagram was about my body. Like I was still very much so like, oh, like health, but look how small I am. Look how shredded I am, you know? And now I look back on that and people message me and they're like, you know, I had to unfollow you for a bit. And I'm really glad I refound your page because now it's so uplifting, but it wasn't always like that. And so anyways, like throughout this injury and chronic pain, I started to actually just share what I was going through. I was just sharing like my body's changing. It feels so hard and uncomfortable. There's really nothing I can do about it. But I guess just me being vulnerable, sharing what I was going through, and also being able to now relate to other women, right? Around like our bodies change, things happen, like we're not meant to stay the same size, and we're also not meant to be our smallest selves. Not only was I able to go through my own healing journey, but then that also morphed into me now helping other women, you know, embark on those paths. So yeah, it's really crazy
Wow.
actually.
And I'm so curious, like, because you were obviously, I imagine that your diet would have been like really strict macro counting, like everything to the like weight on scales type thing, I imagine. What happened to your cycle? Did anything happen?
Yeah, so I actually, my cycle was already messed up because I was on birth control for years, for like 10 years, something like that. And I was actually just skipping my sugar pill anyway. So I probably didn't have my period or my natural period for, yeah, years. And I'm almost certain too that even if I wasn't on birth control, I for sure would have lost it because at that point, like if you see pictures of me, my face was sunken in, like just big dark circles under my eyes. Like you could see my like rib cage, my collarbone. Like I didn't have enough healthy fat on me to possibly have a functioning reproductive system. So yeah, I'm almost
And
certain.
this is something that actually you see a lot in sport. I've had a few friends who have gone on to like compete at the Olympics, excuse me, and they were encouraged like from the age of 16, like because I guess girls get into athletics quite young, but from the age of 16, they're encouraged to go on the pill and skip the sugar pill because the like a female cycle is
Very
not
interruptive.
conducive. Yeah, it's not conducive to a training session. Then they'd have to alter the training session throughout the month, and they don't want to do that. So it's yeah, like I mean that in and of itself, just how easy it is to cancel out the female reproductive cycle, and that's okay. Like that's fine. We'll just stop your body from doing, and from young ages. I mean, you're a little bit older, but 19 to 25 still very young. Like you're still establishing that cycle. So yeah, it's wild when you can step out of that system and look at what's actually going on. You're like, oh my God, like we are the problem.
Well, it's also interesting, and I just thought about this then, like women in gyms, unlike women being in, I guess it's not like it just started happening, but it wasn't as widely kind of accepted, or it wasn't a thing that women did, like go to the gym every single day and do like intense cardio and intense like lifting. And
I don't know what circles you were running in, mate. That was like
I mean, like we did it. When I was young, like I was
That was like
introduced to it. Yeah, I was
Yeah.
introduced to restrictive dieting and going into like a gym environment before I'd left high school. But like my mum and that age group, I don't feel like that was it. Like my dad would go to the gym and like his brothers, and like it was kind of like a man's world. And now we are very much in that, and we're also simultaneously struggling with our fertility. And so I do wonder, you know, like it's only really coming to light now that it's important to honor our cycles and respect what's happening there, and even just understand it, like what's happening to our bodies at that time of the month. Should we be training? And people are really just starting to talk about now, like you should be doing this during this part of your cycle. And so, yeah, I'm interested to know, Marisa, like what you kind of have uncovered there and how you navigate exercise with your cycle now, and if it's returned and things have kind of come back to normal.
Yeah, what you guys are really speaking to is like the fact that nowadays people are so drawn to the extremes, right? Because like you said, like yeah, like weightlifting and going to the gym and just moving our bodies in general is so amazing, but unfortunately when we go to those extremes of like I'm going to train every single day, I used to do that. I used to train every single day, no rest days for probably like over an hour, and no wonder I was like depleted and exhausted and napping 4 times a day and just moody and, you know, brittle hair, crappy skin, crappy gut health, you know, like all these things that happen to us when we do go to these extremes. And when we can step away from that and find that balance, like literally my favorite word ever is just finding a balance that works for us. And for me in my journey, that has just looked like similarly to what you said, like honoring our bodies and trusting that they will signal to us what we need essentially. For me, like I do really find it beneficial to understand our cycle, and we can absolutely, plan our workouts around that. It's nice to tune in and be like, okay, like I'm on my period, my cramps might be, there, and it sucks, and maybe I'm low energy, so I'm gonna not go as hard, or I'm gonna rest today, or I'm just gonna go for a walk, right? And then like when we do have our more energetic phases in our cycle, then we can maybe like do the things that are a little bit more challenging, or we're pushing ourselves. But even then, it shouldn't be this crazy all out 7 days a week hardcore hit training, and that was, I think, the fad for a long time too for women, of like the fasted cardio and doing all this, like I said, the hit training with sprints and high intensity and da 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 da. Also, that's just not really supportive for us as women.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, Marisa, because I studied a Bachelor of Exercise Science, and so got a very good picture of the studies around intermittent fasting and exercise on different, I don't know, with different factors involved, et cetera, et cetera. All the studies are done on men. None of these studies are done on women, and purely because women have a cycle, and so it adds those confounding factors into the studies. But when we look at all this information that we get around exercise, around diets, around, certain even hormone levels, it's a lot of it is based on just men, because it's an easier way to cut confounding factors of a cycle out. So it's something I think that so many people don't realize when they go into like a keto diet, or they're like, I'll fast for 16 hours of the day, and doing all of these
extreme ends of the scale.
They're extreme, and they're diets that affect male and female hormones very, very differently. So thank you for bringing that up, because I feel like that's something that also everyone needs to be aware of when they're going into any of this.
And to speak to that, because it's so, so true, and also what just popped into my head is the fact that when you think about it, when those things are prescribed to women, it's never in like an empowering way, or like this is going to make you strong, or this is going to make you healthy. It's always about like this is going to make you smaller, or lose more fat faster, or da da da, like that's always the main messaging. And I think again that just comes back to the fact that as women, men do struggle with body image too, of course, but for us as women, like it always just all of these fads and extremes and things we do that keep us on the hamster wheel always bring us back to exactly what we started with, of like, oh, if you're smaller, then you'll be loved, or then you'll be worthy, or then you'll be confident. And it always comes back to like that self-love and self-confidence and worthiness starts from within, and it's never ever going to be about your body size.
I mean, body dysmorphia is such a natural thing to have, and we have it from such a young age. And I mean, you can even observe it in like really young kids, not like our kids are pretty young, but like young teens entering that kind of season of their lives, just based on like what they wear and how they do things. And yeah, it just seems like something that's so...
Have you ever looked at photos of like when you were 16?
Yes,
and you
I'm
remember
mortified. It's horrific.
Do you remember thinking when you were 16, like, oh, if only I was 5 kilos smaller? And now I look back at photos of my 16-year-old self and I'm like, damn girl, you are hot. Like,
killing it. Well, I think about that all the time too. Like I often will go back and look at, like if there's a memory that pops up or something pops up, and I remember because just to go back a little bit, like, almost 15 years ago when I started studying health science, I was like, the first things that you learn really is like nutrition, and it's very much just like health is just what you eat and how you move your body and whatever. And so I was like, I had an Instagram page that was basically just dedicated to telling people how to starve themselves, because like that's what I believed it was all about. It's like, stop eating this, don't eat anything. And you have to like calories in, calories out. And like, you should be doing all of this stuff. And yeah, I used to post photos of my body all the time and people would be like so encouraging. And I was like, oh, it's because I'm starving myself. And then I would tell people to just, you know, indirectly starve themselves. And the attention that you get. And I think about this often with influencers, like a lot of these women, and I'm sure you can obviously relate, have built empires on parading their bodies that they most likely achieved by toxic food habits and, you know, living in a gym and, you know, having these really restrictive thoughts and these behaviors. And it must be really, really difficult to have the ability to take a step back and look at yourself and be like, holy shit, like I am in a pickle here. I cannot get off this, you know, this wheel. And if I do, I'm going to lose all this because this is why these people are here. Like look at me, I'm perfect. And it must be so difficult to actually strip it back. And, you know, I'm guessing that's why it's difficult for young kids and young women to really find. There's not many people out there. I mean, you're one of them now, but there's not many people who are just being real about how things work and eating and the relationship to food and exercise in our bodies and nature and, you know, all of those things are actually conducive to being well. So yeah, that was a lot. That just had to come out then.
Yeah, no, it was good though. You hit some really great points.
Good. I'm glad I wasn't just rambling.
Something I share a lot in my community that I think is super powerful is curating your environment. And that's both in the real world and on social media. Because luckily now, I mean, we still have a long way to go, but luckily now there are a lot more pages who speak to those things, right? Of like body diversity, body image healing, food freedom, like really getting away from all that diet culture bullshit, basically. And so it's just a matter of like finding those accounts, unfollowing any accounts that make you feel bad. Like I can say, I don't even care if it's a really close friend. Like if those posts are triggering you in a way, or like at least mute those, right? Like, especially in today's world when we're on our phones so much, which is another thing I try to recommend is like get off social media and get in the real world. But as much as you can, curating your environment, because it's the same thing as like you wouldn't hang out with someone in person, I hope at least, who makes you feel bad. It makes you feel like you have to go on a diet. It makes you feel unworthy. So it's like, it's the same thing with on Instagram. There's so many people I follow now where I'm like, yeah, like I feel so good to just show up in the body that I'm in and to keep nourishing my body and to not like let all that noise affect me. And so that is one thing I think, especially for like, I mean, everyone, but the younger generation too, where their whole world is social media nowadays, like just being very discerning of what you're even allowing into your environment.
I think a lot of that takes a little bit of our like shifting our own perspective too, because I mean, we're taught to like really be attracted to that, you know, Victoria's Secret-esque body. But then I'll see mothers who rock that and I'm like, man, I just want to feed you a sandwich. Like I'm not like drawn to it. And I'll go a little bit Steiner here, but like you can almost feel the energy of their etheric body is starving. Like you just want to, you know, give them a meal.
Let me cook for you.
Can I? But I think one of the things that I love about your Instagram page, Marisa, is you can see that in your before and after photos of like your recovery. And I love looking at those together because I'm like, the first image, you actually, like, I don't see someone that I would strive to be like. Like I see someone who is really depleted, not just in their like physically depleted, but like soul nourishment depleted. And then you see your after photos and man, like you're just so attractive and it's just like it comes through the image. Like you're glowing and happy and it's such a beautiful comparison to see. And I think something that we need to share more, like, okay, this is what society deems as what we should be looking like. This is me just being normal living, and I look a fuck ton better. Yeah, like I am attracting all the boys to my yard. So like it's really I think really important, because like we never see those images. It's always like, this was me straight after my baby, and then this is me like 9 months later when I lost all my baby weight. Like it's just, I don't need to see that shit.
If anyone wants to hold us accountable, we're going to do the 9 months in, 9 months out post, and you'll see the real deal.
I gain weight 9 months out. It's so good.
Not any different to like half 35 weeks pregnant. Anyway, we should talk about the bounce back culture, but also since we're on the topic of like younger kids and younger women, what are like, because I feel like you must see still online and in the communities, like what are some of those things that are kind of like red flags for young girls? Like if you were a parent to a young girl, what would be like the red flags that you would say like in real life if they were showing like behaviors of distorted eating or body dysmorphia, and like how would you help them?
So I would say like red flags to look out for. I mean, I can just specifically, right off the top of my head, think of patterns that I was really involved in, and it was always around, I mean, like the more obvious ones I would say definitely are around food. If meals are really small, or if someone is scared to eat, for example, like if you're a mom and you're cooking a meal for your family, and let's say like your daughter is scared to eat that meal, or doesn't want to eat that meal, or wants to like maybe not have carbs in it, for example, like those would be the signs that you would see of like, okay, so like something's going on, where either there's like food fears coming up, or that need to want to restrict in some way. There's different layers to it too, where people could be struggling on a physical level, where you physically see them like restricting, or saying no to certain things, or whatever it might be. And then it could be a more mental restriction, where they're putting things off limits in their heads, for example, and just fearing things, but maybe still having those things in a way. So I think it really depends. It can look so many different ways and different levels to it for a lot of people. And then on the exercise side of things, similarly, like if it's very extreme, if someone feels the need to be in the gym for hours on end, or only doing an intense type of cardio, I would say those are all the signs that are kind of pointing towards restrictive patterns and going down that route of the very extreme ways of how I can shrink my body.
And that's something that I think it was a post that you actually put up, Marisa, where I was like, it's something that we need to consider as parents quite a bit too, because I mean, when I came into parenthood or motherhood and it was time to start feeding my child foods, I was like, okay, what are the healthiest, safest, options for food? And I mean, we went vegan for 2 years, which is restrictive eating essentially. And I mean, it came from a place of like, oh my God, there's just like chemicals in everything, and I want your hormones to be fine and all of this stuff. And like I was very well researched on increasing like fats and making sure there's, balanced proteins, fats, carbohydrates, all of that jazz. Everything was unprocessed, etc. But even, when you're raising your kids with that kind of mindset, like that could just be planting the seed for restrictive eating. So, it was something that I've had to really surrender to quite a bit. And I think just with my kids growing up, parents are on the same train in terms of healthy eating and lifestyle. So you get the birthday tables that are covered with all the food dyes, every single one. But yeah, I mean, when we first went to Italy, I think that's when I really like let my hair down and was like, all right, cheese is back in. We're like all the pastries, like all the pastas you can eat. Fantastic, like get it into me. And brought that back home which was
Actually,
nice.
where are your cakes? Keshia was making cakes every day, and like every time we would come to record, there was this like a perfect tea cake on the bench, and I was like, this is fucking amazing.
And then I had morning sickness,
and then you
mate,
got morning sickness,
and I
it
couldn't do
ruined
anything.
it, ruined it for everybody. But yeah, no, I'd love to talk about bounce back culture, even though I know that you haven't kind of experienced that for yourself, but it's a thing, and I'm sure you've seen it. And I kind of feel like as mums, and this is going to be our 5th time that we're supposed to bounce back, it's just a thing. Like I don't understand why. I mean, I do understand how people feel like they need to show that, but it's also really sad that mums feel like if they're not back to the same size they were before they, like started showing, that they're somehow not as worthy, or they don't feel good about themselves, or they don't appreciate kind of where they're at. And so I kind of just wanted to speak to that a little bit and just kind of unpack it and try to understand from the perspective of someone who's kind of been in a different position, but also probably understands where women are at when they feel like they need to bounce back from having a baby.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, again, I have never been pregnant. I do not have any babies. So I can't fully place myself there. Although, again, like there are similarities with, yeah, like when your body changes, regardless of the circumstances, it's foreign and it feels hard sometimes. And totally the pressure from society is there for us as women. And I have a really good friend, a best friend, who is pregnant with her first baby. And this is something she talks about a lot on her Instagram, which I think is amazing, because it is so true that, like, okay, here we are. Well, not me, but here we are as pregnant women, hypothetically, like you guys and my friend, for example. You guys are literally like birthing a miracle. Like you're creating a human. And the fact that our bodies can even do that is pretty mind blowing. Obviously we're used to it now because women are we're just doing it. But it's like a freaking miracle when you think about it. And that piece of it, like just to come back to the appreciation that we can, hopefully create more of for our body, all the things that it allows us to do, experience, have in our lives, like it all comes back to like our bodies are our forever homes. And also, I think about this a lot with my own body image, is that no one is actually thinking about you as much as you think they are, or in the way you think they are.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's totally valid to have those feelings, or be scared of like, oh, what if people judge me, or what if people make comments about my body? And unfortunately that has happened. Unfortunately, there's just people out there who they don't understand the social cues of like, those are just not comments you need to be making to other people. But in the same breath, like no one is going to bed at night being like, oh, like her body like still looks this way or has changed like this, and like I'm not gonna be able to sleep now because it's all I can think of, And so I think in the grand scheme of things, like at least for me, when I hone in on the fact that like no one is thinking about me, no one gives a crap about how my body has changed or what it looks like no one gives a shit. And again, that's not to not validate those very real feelings, but it's kind of like that
the reality
freeing
of it.
fact
It's
of
the
like
truth.
you're
Yeah.
like you're living your life, you're creating a beautiful family for yourself, and who cares if Susie down the block, I mean, the comment will of course like maybe hurt if that happens, but like she is not the one in my shoes living my life with my beautiful children, with the life that I'm living.
I think it's a really poignant point to make that our children, I don't know about yours, but mine like to comment on my body. But when it comes from them, I could never get hurt because I'm like you're a child. You don't think about body image or anything. Like they'll look at me and be like, "Oh, mum, your belly is getting so big." Like, and it's really like exaggerated. And if that came from some stranger, I'd be like, "Oh, fuck you." But it comes from my kids, and I'm like, that's just what strangers are thinking anyway. Like, you know, they're not. It's not coming from like a place of commenting on your body. It's coming from a place of they're making just an observation that they don't really care about, but it's an observation, and like you move on.
I think something that's also incredibly potent to consider is because like I always shower with my kids and like we're all very naked around our house, and I know you are too. And I remember having this conversation with a friend like years and years ago about like imagine what they would see or what the standard is if you were obsessed with working out, you were obsessed with bouncing back, you were obsessed with like eradicating your saggy breastfeeding boobs, and you took a shower with your little daughters, and you know as they grew they saw like these perky boobs with no
Hair.
I don't have hair on my boobs, but okay.
I'm sorry. I'm talking about underarm hair. Everyone's got a little nipple hair. No.
But yeah, like super washed, like ripped abs and perfect asses, and like that was the goal for them. And I remember complaining about my post breastfeeding boobs like years ago, and my friend was just like, "Why? That's where your babies." Came from.
Was I that friend?
No, it was actually Maddie. And she was like, I think it's crazy. Like, why would you be not into your like big, round, dark breastfeeding nipples and like your sagginess and all this stuff? Like that's where your baby came from. And like, would you want her to hate her body if that's what it looked like after she gave birth? And I was like, oh my God, this is like the representation of womanhood. So I've always had that in mind with showing my body to them, and yeah, that being totally normal and like
and loving on your body, so that they know it's normal to love on a changing body. And
one that they don't see often paraded. You know, like it comes back to that celebrating too. Like we've always celebrated women being small and being ripped after giving birth and being totally perfect after they've gone through this massive thing, which is so unrealistic. And it's always been like that. We've always celebrated unrealistic bodies.
Can I give a little insight though? Because I am someone who does lose weight during pregnancy. So postpartum, I am very thin. Like you've seen me.
Yeah. You button up those jeans straight away and I'm like,
well, they're like baggy, and it's not like, and I get really repulsed by people who are like, oh my God, look at you. You just bounced back. I'm like, I'm not bounced back. I am depleted and I am hungry and I feed me and I need to be eating constantly to be able to keep up with the supply for feeding this baby. And when I see a woman postpartum who looks like they've bounced back, I'm like, man, I need to feed her. Like,
are you okay?
Yeah. Are you okay? Because I think that as women, we actually should be carrying that extra, like that's going to breast milk, that's going to a place, it's necessary. So it's, it's changing the perspective around it. Like where what we should be congratulating is like, you didn't lose weight during pregnancy. Like, well done. Like you're actually going to be able to feed your child with way less effort.
Yeah.
And
that's good insight, actually.
Yeah. Because I know quite a few girls now. I've met a few girls who feel the same. They're just like, oh my God, I feel haggard and like,
yeah.
What a time.
Can't wait.
Yeah, no, I guess it's, you know, like even though you haven't had kids, it is relevant because it's the same mindset. It's like the same thing, you know, like no different to celebrating a woman who's just so miserable in the gym versus someone who's
walking down the beach and happy and healthy and glowing.
But yeah, something I actually did want to ask was like, because I've got my own list of things, and I imagine you've got some pretty crazy ideas about like what you used to think were really healthy and necessary to thrive, and now you're just like, wow, that's so toxic. I can't believe that I ever even maybe recommended it.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably a good old laundry list there. The Let's say the things that come straight away to my mind, like I was a huge faster. Like I used to think like, oh, the longer I can go without eating, like the better. I'm getting like that badge of honor for like going hours and hours without eating, just guzzling coffee. I don't need food. Like I run off thin air. You don't? Like that was like so I don't even know how I got into that honestly, but that was just my life for I think like almost a year where I celebrated the fact that I could wake up, guzzle coffee, not eat until noon, and I was like, yeah, I feel so good. I'm doing these crazy workouts, like look at me go. And then of course, like eventually like the stress catches up with me and my body starts to like deteriorate and I'm like, going out for example to the mall with my mom and I'm like having nervous mental breakdowns because I don't have fuel and I'm cranky and I'm ornery and I'm like jittery and I have like a pounding headache and I'm foggy and I feel like I'm going to pass out and then that just started to become my everyday and I was like, "Okay, something's not right. Something's not working." And thankfully then like I started to introduce back enough food in general but also the breakfast piece, but I would say like that was a really big one that I know still so many women we've just have it ingrained that like less food is better, the longer you can go without food is better. Like yeah, we like associate the discipline almost with it's like a pride thing. I'm not even too sure. I think everyone kind of associates it differently, but that was a big one for me. Um that's like I would say like the top of mind. And then similarly, like I did go through a phase with orthorexia where I was so like I'm only eating whole foods. I'm not going to eat anything processed. Like this food is bad, this food is the devil, like da 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 da. And yeah, it just created this like whole hamster wheel digging that hole of like now I'm so scared to go have a piece of banana bread that my mom baked me or like go out for that impromptu lunch date and not scour the menu and analyze every single ingredient in this meal. It was just like so toxic and consuming. Those are like the main things that I lived with for a really long time.
I think it's really interesting because like people are doing that now, but it's almost kind of almost glamorized in a way that's still labeled healthy, but it's more like holistic health. It's like, oh, you only eat organic, you only eat grass-fed, you only eat wild caught, you only eat like this certain thing. And like, how could you ever eat a cookie? Or like, oh, but it's sourdough cookie. Or like, I don't know, like there's a whole table of new ways of being extreme or restrictive, but it's now totally acceptable. And I feel like I can definitely relate to that because I used to do it too. I was like, my kid would never eat anything that's not organic. My kid would never eat that. Like I'm never giving them anything.
My kids would go to a party and be like, hey, is that organic?
Yeah.
And I was like, ooh.
Yeah, I know. And so
what have I done?
But I feel like I've definitely come out of that and now I celebrate just the joy of food and the joy of enjoying a moment and that, trusting that my body is so bloody intelligent and that I'm actually in good enough health to be able to feel joy and my body just will respond to the fact that I'm so happy about, how good something tastes or just, oh, this is such a beautiful moment. I'm out, we're eating together and it's like we're just eating this beautiful pasta or pizza or like whatever it is. And yeah, like that just lands and that just is that's just like such a good place to be.
Wait, my happiest memories are around some kind of food.
Yeah.
Like legitimately my happiest memories are around like some kind of eating situation, usually with family and friends and everyone's together and it's over a meal.
Feasting.
Yeah.
We've done it for millennia, right? When people used to get together, like I wasn't there obviously, but I've read about, you know, like tribes and they come together and they
Jesus
celebrate.
is at like a fucking table with all these mates.
Yeah. So it's I think.
True though. It's like, it is like a cultural thing too. And I think especially like coming from Canada and the United States. I mean, I'm not American, but you know, in that North American realm, we don't have those cultural traditions of like sitting around a table, enjoying a meal, talking, sharing, connecting. Like I'm not sure about, maybe that's more a thing in Australia. I know it for sure is like part of the culture in Europe. That's why everyone is just like eating all the good food and like loving their life, right? And there is also something to be said about the energy around the food. And that's why like when you have those really good memories and you're just present with the food and you're enjoying it, like yes, like there is of course that balance. There's something to be said about the nutrition you're getting out of the food, but like if you just have that really good energy and you're loving it and it's, you know, creating memories and maybe you're enjoying it with a loved one, like you eating the healthiest, most organic, whatever it is, if you, let's say, don't actually like that food or the meal doesn't satisfy you or you're kind of just dreading it because you're eating it because you think it's good for you, like the energy isn't the same. You're not going to be digesting it the same. And it's just different. Like the energy we have around food, I think, is actually an important conversation that is not really out there either.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, for sure, there are things that should be considered, like the fact that our food is so tampered with and, you know, but to just say that you're never going to eat something or you have to
go out for a dinner because it has to be locally sourced or, you know.
But I think one of the things that I'm actually really loving at the moment seeing come through is because we speak about this a lot, is like the total dissociation from our bodies and nature and our biology and, you know, our physiology as young women don't even know what I mean, it took me until I was like not that long ago to fully understand like the full scope of my own cycle.
I still don't know. Like, obviously that's how this happened.
Yeah. And there's a lot of layers to that. And I feel like we do not know enough about our own body. And I mean, I'm not saying that we have to read scientific papers front to back to understand what happens. It's just the reconnecting to our bodies without needing any fancy scientific explanation or labels, or really it's not complex, it's very simple, but we're very disconnected. And lately I've been seeing a lot of moms get together and kind of celebrate those big moments for their daughters, like the coming of age, you know, celebrating their cycles. And I feel like when we do that, it becomes like you're kind of weaving this stronger sense of being. And as a young girl, if your period is like celebrated, like welcome, you have arrived at this magical place, like respect your body, like honor it. There's no way you're going to fuck with it by starving yourself. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
and I feel like if we can honor that more as women, as older women, for the younger women coming next and our children and our daughters, that's like that unfuckable with kind of nature of showing them. And, you know, like if that looks like not shaving your underarms or not. Actually, someone asked me the other day, they're like, it's so weird. I did a Q&A and I never end up answering them because it's just wild what people ask. But someone asked me like,
but people keep asking your questions because we will answer them.
Eventually, like in this form.
Yeah.
But someone asked me, they're like, what's your stance on pubic hair? And I was like, why do you give a shit what I think about pubic hair?
Can I let you know my stance on pubic hair?
I did think about it and I was like,
it's fantastic.
I don't really care about it. Like I go from extremes. Like someone will see me one day and I've got like the longest hair. I've got hair coming from everywhere and I just don't care. And that's funny because it's rhymed. It's rhyming. But then and then I'll just shave it and like, or I'll get rid of it. And it's like, I just go between like totally accepting that I've gone a long time without shaving my legs, or like right now my eyebrows, like sorry about that.
Dude, I can't see my vagina anymore. So I'm full bushing now until I can see it again. And I feel really bad because I wear tiny, teeny, tiny bikini bottoms, but everyone's just, I can't see it, so I don't care.
I don't know how we got into this, but I think it's
This will be the real.
I think it's just like not being so like obsessed and weirded out by the most natural things that we have. And yeah, and showing, I mean, that's the thing, like my kids can see sometimes there's a lot of hair, sometimes there's a little bit, and sometimes there's none. And I feel like normalizing those things, and that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about binge eating and being obsessed with working out. But it's all in the same
body
spectrum.
image.
Yeah. So yeah, if that person that asked that question is satisfied.
We love pubes. And also, I like for the men out there, nothing less attractive than a man that gets rid of all of his hair. I need.
You're fueling body image problems here, Keshia.
just grow it out. It's great. Something to hold on to. It's fantastic.
Oh, but yes, back to the celebrating of, you know, coming of age and celebrating our initiations and celebrating our initiations. You know what I mean?
No, I had the word and then it left me really quickly.
But yeah, Marisa, are there things that you feel like you've learned along the way that kind of like nuggets of gold that we could give to younger women who think this way of like, oh, I have to be this, I have to look this certain way because like a social media, like it's way harder now than it's ever been to be able to just look at yourself and be happy with that. There's such a force out there of this is actually what's good. Like only girls who look like this have, you know, millions of followers and they're making all this money and whatever it may look like for a younger person these days. Yeah, like what do you feel like we could do to kind of transfer the attention to just us being perfect the way we are?
I mean, yeah, there's like so many avenues to go down. I think that the main thing is always awareness. Like it starts with self-awareness of understanding that maybe we have some negative self-talk coming up or comparing ourselves, right? And I think with that, it's also important to hold space for that version of ourselves because it's not also helpful to get frustrated or mad at ourselves of like, why can't I just love myself? And why am I so mean to myself? Because then that's just perpetuating that cycle. So I think like a big thing for me, you know, like as you spoke about those side by side pictures of when I was like deep in that phase of my life with the restricting and poor body image, like I look at those and I still try and hold space for that version of myself because she didn't really know any differently, and that's what she thought she had to do to be loved or to be accepted. So I think the piece of self-compassion is always, you know, conjoined with awareness is really important because we also can't get anywhere with self-frustration or beating ourselves up further. And I also bring it back to as well, kind of like reflecting on where did these narratives come from? Because no one is born hating their body or comparing themselves or whatever it is. Like I think probably all of us have a picture of us as kids and little girls of like sticking our bellies out and just like being in all these like weird positions, like we didn't care, we were just having fun, right? And I think whenever we can bring it back to that of like this was kind of conditioned into me, like I was taught to, you know, see other bodies and think that that's what I should look like, or I was taught to hate my body or be insecure, da 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 da. I think that also helps the conversation of like, these aren't actually my thoughts or beliefs. They're just maybe all around me and maybe they're really loud. But at any point, I can also start to change that narrative and rewrite that script. And I'm not saying that's easy by any means, but again, with that self-awareness piece of like, yeah, like I don't want to live my life this way. I don't want to get caught up in comparing myself. And also to that, if you just look in the real world, you see so many just diverse real people. Like I live in Mexico now and I'm always on the beach and I see so many different body types. It's almost never what we see in society's like quote unquote ideal world. Like it's rarely a small fraction of what women look like. Women are all shapes and sizes. We've all got cellulite. We've all got rolls and stretch marks. And when I see that, I like celebrate that. And I'm almost like, yeah, like she actually rocks that. And like, I don't even see those features on her. It's just that for me, maybe like I had a moment of insecurity and then I'm like, oh, but like, I don't even notice that on her. So I'm going to keep wearing the bikini or living my life. Right. Like, I think it comes back to like taking time off of social media or at least curating it to see like the real world isn't that. And also, most people on social media who might be quote unquote, again, like in that societal standard, like we don't even know if their photos are edited. We don't even know if they look like that. Like in this moment, there were so many times where I would post old pictures of myself like years ago, maybe like right before a competition, and I didn't look like that in that moment. So there's just so many examples like that where you have no idea. And there's so many like editing tools nowadays, so many like apps, and we just need to be very aware that it's not real life in any respect, whether it's someone's body or someone's success or how much money someone's making. Like it all comes down to the fact that like it's just not real life.
Yeah, like I'm right now, face filters are coming up for me, and I just can't believe the number of people who use them. Like once it was pointed out to me, I was just like, holy
But also
cow.
our phones, like new phones, have like a natural, like an inbuilt filter in
No,
them.
mate, mine will show me every single pore and wrinkle. It's fantastic.
No. When you FaceTime, I don't know if anyone's noticed this, but when you FaceTime, it kind of like airbrushes you a little bit and blurs out the background. It's really full on. I'm like, that's not what I look like. It like enhances you. It's like a natural enhancement on your own phone, like on the screen.
That is mind fuckery.
And when you take a photo of yourself, like on your phone, like a selfie mode, it's like I don't know if anyone, I could be tripping out here,
No, mate,
but I'm pretty sure every time I FaceTime, I can see it. And I'm like, that is really weird. It's like there's like an airbrushy vibe, and it's like brighter or something, like an elevation.
My phone doesn't do that. My phone's like, bitch, you old.
Maybe you need to upgrade.
Maybe it's like
Your phone actually really looks like it needs to be upgraded.
I accidentally throw my phone a lot.
Yes.
But no, and when I see it, because when I look in the mirror, I don't see all the details of my skin quite as well as when I take a selfie, which is why you won't see many selfies from me. But I'm like, oh no, this isn't right. I look way better than this usually, and just like move on.
Oh
my God. Well,
Perspective. It's all about perspective.
yeah, we love ourselves, don't we?
And also, and at the same time, like coming back to what matters, like I always try to zoom out in those moments of like if I'm picking myself apart or like, yeah, for sure. Like if I take a selfie and I'm just like, oh, like cool, like I just have all this like acne right now and I'm just feeling blah. But it's like I just zoom out of like, you know, what's really going to matter in my life in a year or 10 years from now. Like it's going to be the memories you made, the people who are in your life, the yummy food that you're eating, the things you're doing. And I just think, yeah, there's like kind of like this movement starting where people are so burnt out from social media. And it's for that reason, like people are just like, there's a word for it. It's like, I don't know, we're like perfection hangover or something, where we're just so sick of seeing like this perfect image portrayed. And like sometimes you just gotta like put your phone down and go out into nature and just be with the trees for
I
a
would
bit,
say
you
a
know?
lot of the time we need to do that.
Yeah. Hug a tree. Hug a tree.
A lot more.
Yeah. Disconnect and reconnect with yourself. Well, I feel like we could unpack a lot. There's a lot of layers to this, but I feel like we've touched on some
Key points.
and thank you so much for sharing.
Your story, yeah, because Marisa, it is inspirational. And if people aren't following, can you share your Instagram handle?
Yes, so it's my name, Marisa, and then HOPEEE. So Marisa Hope with 3 E's at the end.
Perfect.
It's beautiful. It actually makes me really hungry because you eat lots of yummy stuff.
Actually, that's one thing I wanted to ask is because I remember I used to do intermittent fasting as well. And I used to like train twice a day. And I used to be very obsessed with sculpting my body and looking a certain way. And I felt like after I stopped restrictive eating, and even sometimes now I'm like, oh, how do people eat so much? Like I look at some people's plates like that are recovering from, eating disorders and stuff. And I just don't like, how did you go from eating nothing to eating so much? Like some days I can eat heaps and then others I'm just like, I couldn't even eat 2 eggs this morning. So did you find that there was a way of kind of refeeding phase almost? Because just to add to that, I feel like a lot of people justify, I just can't eat breakfast. It just doesn't work for me. Like I'm just not hungry.
Yeah. Well, that's like a whole other thing happening, which I can also touch on. But in regards to the like hunger and the hunger shifts, I was like laughing as you brought up that question because it's so true. And I think about that a lot where I'll say to like, even, when I'm having a meal with my parents or something, I think like, I used to be able to eat so much, like not even in a good way per se, but I was just so ravenous all the time because when you deprive your body, not only physically, but mental restriction, like you kind of do become this like bottomless pit because there's just so much scarcity there of like, I don't know when I'm going to eat again or when I'm going to allow myself this particular food again. And that's usually where a lot of people get stuck in the restrict and binge cycle. And so when you do start eating enough, a lot of people will find that, yeah, they have this like insatiable hunger because your body is like, oh my God, like she's feeding us, like, let's go. Like we're getting out of survival mode. Like she's giving us the nourishment we need to function. And so that is normal. And what I found is that over time too, like for myself and the women that I work with, when you start to give yourself that consistent nourishment and it's no longer sporadic or like restrictive in any way, your body does naturally kind of get to this set point of like, what meals feel satisfying and like enough for you. And you find that groove. Like, for example, now, like I eat obviously very consistently and well throughout the day, but my portions are, satisfying for me. But I think about the way that my portions used to look and they were like 5 times bigger just because like that's what I needed at that time. Like I was so deprived that like my body needed that. So there is like that gradual shift that does happen.
Yeah.
Totally normal actually. And to not fear that, it is all about trusting your body. So you do have to trust that phase of like, okay, like this is what it needs and I need to honor this and to just trust like that it will naturally progress in whatever way it needs to go. And then to answer the second part of the question you asked, like when people experience that of like, oh, I'm just like never hungry in the morning, or I skip lunch and I'm fine, for example, that is usually our body running off of stress and again being in survival mode. Because the analogy I always use is if you're being chased by a bear, you're not focused on like having your next meal, you're focused on getting away from that bear and surviving. And the body doesn't know the difference between that scenario or just you not feeding it and it being basically in this like famine. So it's like, I think really valuable to know that stress does play a role in our lives. When we're not eating enough, it will ramp up to keep us, kind of at this state of like, we can still function. But then like I shared with my fasting journey, then once that stress doesn't feel so good, that's when we get like ravenous or dizzy, the brain fog, the low energy, right? So we don't run off the neck.
Yeah, I'm so glad we touched on that because I know a lot of people justify not feeling hungry in the morning as like it's just them and it's just like what they have always done, and it's totally normal for people to just not have a meal because it's just them. But really, there's an underlying reason why that's happening. So I'm glad we touched on that.
Just waking up stressed. I fall in that category.
I'm going to force you to eat after this.
Mate, I'm hungry. I'm really, really hungry right now.
We're going to go now, Marisa, because we're hungry.
Before we do, can you let us know what are your offerings online? And we've already touched on where they can find you on Instagram, but any other places that they can find you?
Yes, absolutely. So I have a few different ways that you can work with me right now. And it really just depends on like where you're at in your journey and how much support you need. So firstly, I do have an online course where it's very foundational work where we cover food freedom, body image healing, and self-confidence, and it's self-paced. So that's like a nice place for someone to start. You do get access to my community of women, which is really, really special because it's all women going through similar things. We support each other. Sometimes that journey of finding those things can feel quite isolating if we don't have people in our lives who have been there, who understand it. So the collective healing piece is always just super, super powerful in my experience. I'm also launching a group program starting January 8th. So that is similar to the course, but we have live meetings. So we chat once a week together. I am more so doing the teaching in like a real-time type setting. And then that also includes the community aspect. And then I have my one-on-one coaching. So this is like, we deep dive, we go more personal, more individualized for whatever someone needs in all those areas. And my website, where you can check all those things out at, is hopewellnesscoaching.com.
Amazing.
Perfect. Thank you so much for coming on today, Marisa. It's been a delight to have you. And hopefully everyone gets a bit of inspiration to...
More importantly, I hope you're all hungry after this.
So hungry. So hungry.
Go eat, everybody.
Thanks again, Marisa. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in to the Road to Wisdom podcast. To join the journey, you can follow us on Instagram at theroadtowisdom.podcast and at www.theroadtowisdompodcast.com. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. We look forward to seeing you next week with more juicy content.